The air in Camelot was still, too still. King Arthur slept a heavy, dreamless slumber. But not Merlin. For him, the night was a battlefield, a swirling vortex of shadows and whispers. He saw it not through his eyes, but through a shattered vision in his mind. The kingdom, his kingdom, splintered like glass. A colossal serpent of pure darkness, its scales a mosaic of broken oaths and forgotten promises, coiled around the very heart of the city. He saw Morgana, not as a witch, but as a queen of chaos, her face a mask of cold triumph. The spell wasn't just magic, it was a hungry void, designed to consume light, hope, and the very foundation of Camelot. Merlin's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew this was no ordinary premonition. It was a direct assault on the soul of the realm. A ticking clock. The shadow serpent was already in motion, slithering closer with every beat of his desperate pulse. He had to wake up. But the vision was a cage, a dream woven by Morgana herself to keep him trapped while her true work began. The vision broke. Merlin gasped, air tearing at his lungs, but the silence that greeted him was more terrifying than any scream. Camelot was silent. The city that usually hummed with life, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the laughter of children, the distant bugle call of the watch, was unnervingly still. He stumbled to his window, the heavy drapes pulling back to reveal a kingdom frozen in time. Not in ice, but in a deep, unnatural slumber. Every person, every animal was a statue. A baker, hand outstretched to knead dough. A guard, mid-step on his patrol. Even the birds on the rooftops. Morgana's spell wasn't a destructive force, but an insidious poison, silencing the world to make it vulnerable. This was a psychological war. With everyone asleep, there was no one to sound the alarm, no one to fight back. Merlin was alone. The only thing moving was a single, crimson petal from a rose bush, caught in an impossibly slow drift of wind. It was a taunt, a signature. Morgana wanted him to see what she had done. And the weight of his isolation, the crushing pressure of being the last one awake, was the real trap. Merlin ran. His footsteps, the only sound in a world of statues, echoed off the stone walls of the castle. He reached the throne room, the grand hall where Arthur's laughter had so often filled the air. Now silence. Arthur was there, seated on his throne, frozen not in stone, but in a state of suspended animation. His hand was raised, as if to issue a command. His face, usually so full of purpose, was a still mask of quiet dignity. But Merlin noticed the detail Morgana had left for him. A single, dark thread of shadow magic, a spectral tendril, was wrapped around Arthur's heart. This wasn't just sleep, it was a slow, deliberate drain. Morgana wasn't just silencing the kingdom, she was taking its very heart, its king, and slowly, methodically, absorbing his strength. The tendril pulsed faintly with a malevolent light. It was a countdown, a clock ticking down to the moment the last of Arthur's light would be extinguished, and Camelot would fall forever. Merlin knew he couldn't break the main spell by force. He had to sever the connection to Arthur. He reached out his hand, but before he could touch the king, a sudden, sharp tremor shook the floor. The tremors intensified. The floor of the throne room cracked, and a deep fissure split the ancient stone. But not just the floor, it was a rip in the fabric of reality itself. From the chasm, a chorus of whispers, 1,000 voices speaking as one, slithered forth. They were the forgotten pains, the unspoken betrayals, the dark secrets of Camelot's past. Morgana's spell wasn't a curse of inaction, but a weapon of psychological warfare. The whispers promised power, offered escape, and preyed on Merlin's deepest insecurities. You're a failure. You couldn't save Nimue. You can't save him either. The voices twisted his own doubts into razor-sharp daggers, aimed straight at his heart. He felt his resolve waver, his magic, the very core of his being, flickering under the assault. Morgana knew that to take Camelot, she didn't need to defeat its army, she only needed to break its champion. Merlin gritted his teeth, his eyes locked on Arthur's frozen form. The whispers grew louder, more personal, more venomous. He had to act. He had to find a way to silence them, or he would become just another statue in her dark gallery. The whispers were a tidal wave, threatening to drown him. Merlin closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in a desperate search for a counter. He needed an anchor, a memory pure enough to cut through Morgana's dark symphony. He focused, pushing past the poison, and found it. A moment, captured like a shard of stained glass. Arthur, young and reckless, pulling the sword from the stone. The sun streaming through the trees, a blinding light of destiny. The faces of the people, not frozen in terror, but alive with hope and awe. This memory wasn't just a nostalgic flicker, it was a potent source of magic, a raw, uncorrupted spell of its own. He clutched the staff in his hand, a conduit for this newfound power. The whispers screeched in protest, their voices cracking like ice under pressure. Morgana's spell, designed to feed on doubt, was now being starved by unwavering belief. Merlin opened his eyes. The tendrils of shadow magic recoiled, hissing as they touched the light radiating from him. He wasn't fighting Morgana's magic anymore. He was fighting her with the very essence of Camelot. The light from Merlin's staff wasn't just light, it was an anthem. A song of hope, of defiance, of the very best parts of Camelot. It pulsed outward, a shockwave of raw power, shattering Morgana's dark spell with the force of a hammer blow. The whispers evaporated into nothingness. The shadowy tendril around Arthur's heart shrieked, a sound of pure agony, and began to unravel. Piece by piece, the shadow magic disintegrated, returning Arthur to serene, though still frozen, state. But as the tendril dissolved, it released a concentrated burst of malevolent energy. Morgana's final defense. The energy wasn't a curse, but a seal. It locked the doors of the throne room from the outside, sealing Merlin inside, trapping him with Arthur. Morgana knew she couldn't break Merlin's will, so she decided to isolate him. The hum of the spell faded, replaced by the heavy silence of a tomb. Merlin was no longer a champion. He was a prisoner, the last one awake in a city of stone, with a clock ticking down to an unknown and likely terrible end. The silence was a new kind of enemy. Merlin was a general without an army, a healer trapped with his patient. He stood before Arthur, the last hope of a kingdom, and felt the crushing weight of his failure. But a true wizard doesn't surrender. He saw the puzzle. The seal on the doors was a lock, and the key wasn't a spell, but a sacrifice. Morgana had planned for his power, for his bravery, but not for his most closely guarded secret. The key was a sliver of his own life force, his connection to the very magic of Camelot. A desperate, final gamble. He looked at Arthur's face, a monument to a legacy he couldn't let crumble. Merlin pressed his hand against the sealed door, his body trembling with the effort. He began to chant, not a spell of power, but a spell of giving. A transfer, a trade. As the words left his lips, a cold, painful light radiated from his hand, and he felt his own strength, his years of accumulated wisdom and power, drain away. This was the price of freedom. The seal shattered, the heavy doors of the throne room swinging open on their own accord. A sliver of morning light, cold and gray, fell across the floor. Merlin, his magic spent, his body weak, stumbled out into the silent corridors. The slumbering kingdom was untouched, but a crucial part of its soul, its wizard, was diminished. The pain was more than physical. It was the echo of 1,000 forgotten spells, 1,000 lost memories of power. He had paid the price, but the silence remained. The city was still frozen. The sun was rising, but Camelot was trapped in an eternal dawn. Merlin knew this was just the first move in a longer game. Morgana hadn't been defeated, she had been tested, and now she knew his weakness. He had saved Arthur, but he had lost a part of himself, and Morgana would not forget it.